so welcome back. We're going to start our Q&A session now. And I'm going to start with two questions for Kenneth that I've already got planned. So the first question that I want to ask you is, throughout your journey and your career, what has been your biggest obstacle and how did you overcome that?
Oh, I wish I had a prepared, glib, off-the-cuff answer that would sound really slick and incisive. I don't. Okay, I'm going to say the first thing that comes into my head is I think probably one of the biggest obstacles to anything is oneself. How one deals with any situation that you confront and how your ability to deal with that is all about the self, really. It's very easy to blame other people for things that go wrong and circumstance. And, of course, you can't work in the arts and not face many challenging things that you wish were in your control. But in the end, I suppose, the one thing that's in our power is how we choose to deal with them. So in that sense, I'd say perhaps one of my, for me, perhaps one of my biggest obstacles is how well I can, is me, how well I deal with situations and how well you know yourself.
Okay. The second question is, I was actually speaking to Dennis about this just a couple of minutes ago. Yeah. When I was a young child, from an African household, yes. I was very much indoctrinated in the sciences and the math subjects. Yes. And I was told that I had to become a doctor. Yes. And I literally applied for medicine. And then I said, no, I don't want to do it. I want to study English. I want to study an arty sort of subject. And there's a lot of sort of misunderstanding, I shall say, with a lot of elder, for me anyway, African parents into the arts and what that offers. So what would you say to not only the parents, but for the child that really wants to go into the arts?
I mean, that's a big one. We could spend a long time talking just about that. Look, I recognise the thing you say about an African household because myself and all my siblings were given similar instructions, which of course you can see from my career choice I disobeyed. But I also understand it. I mean, regardless of whether you're from an African household, I understand, and it's a question, I understand that as a parent, you want security for your children. That's normal. I think the thing I would say to parents today is the world has changed significantly. So way back in the Thatcher era, I don't know if you've come across someone called Charles Handy, but one of his books, he's someone who helped start the London Business School. And I think he's a great guru. If you read him in his books, he doesn't use the words of management speak, but he absolutely gets to the point. And he predicted that by the year 2000, most people would be in portfolio employment. And by that he meant people will either be doing a series of different jobs at the same time, or they'll be doing different jobs in succession, one after the other. That is how the majority of the workforce now is employed. So the idea that there are safe careers or ones that will give you a job for life has changed so much. The idea that there are set pockets of knowledge that will set you up for life, I think, is a misnomer. Now, of course, there are some careers where that still perhaps stands true to a certain extent, perhaps in medicine, perhaps in law. But I'd say that has reduced so significantly. What I think we need to be thinking about is what are the skills and attributes that a young person today will need to help them succeed and to flourish in 21st century. And I think they need to be very creative, very resourceful, very flexible, and willing to continue to learn throughout their whole career, to be adaptable and to seize opportunities, to be great team players, to be able to work with other people, to be able to jump across boundaries, to see opportunity and to make connections. I was coming back to something I mentioned. I know there's people who can build bridges and see opportunities between things, between areas that might seem at the surface completely discrete, but actually someone goes, there's a connection there. I'm going to make it happen. So the other thing, I suppose, I might also question is, would you rather, as a parent, be the person who is resented by one of your children for having stopped them doing the thing that they were absolutely passionate about, or would you rather be there to help them pick up the pieces if it doesn't work out? It's a tough one. But I think, one, the world's changed, and two, I think, so the world has changed. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, we're going to start taking any questions from the floor now.
First question is, what's your definition of success? The second element of that question is, rather than looking retrospectively, going forward, what does success look like to you? And the last part of my question is, how do you pronounce your middle name?
Okay, I'll answer the third question first. I pronounce my middle name Olumuyiwa. For those who are not fluent Yoruba speakers, and I'm not fluent, but Olu means God, and Muyiwa literally means has brought him here to us. So God has brought him here to us. Many Nigerian names begin Olu something, Olushola, Olukayode, Olufumulayo. And so if you abbreviate it, it's not so much the Olu bit that's important, but the next bit. Sorry, so the other question was, what is my definition of success?
Yes, and what does success look like to
going
you
forward?
Going forward, not retrospectively.
I can feel I'm not going to answer these questions well, or I'm going to sidestep it. I think, Tunde, the definition of success really depends on the context. Because if personal satisfaction and success can be very particular, and it might be entirely separate to work, or it could be connected. Can I answer that in a very particular way, which has not to do with my role now, but one thing that makes me laugh when I think how I was as a dancer? Sometimes when you'd be performing a piece for a length of time, you would get hung up or obsessed with maybe one or two, sometimes three particular moments. And by moments, I mean things that maybe lasted in real time a second. But sometimes those things were kind of like talismans. And it wasn't about superstition, but it was about personal hunger to get those challenging things right. And if you came off stage knowing that those things had gone the way you wanted to them, you'd come off stage sometimes going, I did a brilliant show tonight. And when those things didn't go well, you could come off stage going, I was absolutely terrible tonight. And the truth is, when I look at it now, I think probably neither of those were true. Because actually what made the piece and the performance successful was the whole. And not just your whole, but actually how everyone else on stage integrated and made that thing happen. So the things that you would privately obsess about were important for your own satisfaction. And that's the nature of, the desire to be perfectionist. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the reality was, when you judge success under those terms, sometimes I look back and think, well, actually, that wasn't reality. That was a very personal measure of success, which probably, so somebody, you could come off stage as an individual thinking you've done a brilliant show, and the choreographer's going, actually, it wasn't very good tonight. Or it's nice when it coincided, but it didn't always coincide for particular reasons. Sometimes the outside eye had a much clearer sense of the whole. So I don't know. I think those things for me, Stoney, I don't have one measure of success that I hold in my head. I think those things are very much to do with circumstance, and I think those things can change and fluctuate. Sometimes success is about what happens, in the next 5 seconds or in the next minute, and sometimes one's able to set much longer goals. And I think I probably have. It's like a double thing. I think you probably have. For me, I think if I think about it now, I think I have probably different things going on at the same time. What does success look like going forwards? Okay, on a purely personal level, if I can get through this life without having caused huge harm or discomfort or pain to other human beings, I would be happy. If I can get through this life and somewhere have some small notion that I have maybe made a positive difference to other people's lives, I would be extremely happy, but you can't necessarily know, and who knows whether you ever really know that. Although for myself, if someone's made a positive difference to my life, I try my very hardest to actually say it to them at the first opportunity I get. So there's people that have taught me or coached me or nurtured me or supported me, and now if I see them, I'm not shy, and I won't assume that there's going to be another opportunity, because sometimes there isn't. So if someone has made a difference to my life, I will try and tell them, because I know that if you don't say them, they might never know. And in terms of business and the work I do day to day, well, I think success at one level is survival in the current climate. That sounds horribly bleak, but we're facing some real challenges in the next period. We know they're going to be how significant they are, but Tracy and I were just talking about the comprehensive spending review and the cuts which will happen at lots of different levels, including local authorities. So this survival. But then, of course, with every challenge like that, there is an opportunity, and the two things go hand in hand. We know that we're going to have to completely fundamentally change our business model to become less reliant on public subsidy. We're going to have to become much better at fundraising, even though I think we're very good as we can, well, we're not as good as we can be at it, but we're doing a pretty good job for the size of organisation that we are. We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to build new relationships. We're going to have to make sure that that the public value why we're there. But there are some real opportunities. So I think there's a jeopardy and there's an opportunity. So at an organisational level, a success in 5 years' time would be if we have achieved that a new business model and we're less reliant on public funding. Sorry, that was a long answer to maybe a three-part question.
I had a question. When you were speaking about yourself, you talked about yourself as a dancer, as an arts administrator. Obviously, you were nominated as well in the leaders category for Media and the Art for the British Black Business Awards. How do you see yourself now? Because you've spoken a lot about seeing yourself as a dancer for years, decades, in fact, in your life. So how do you see yourself now?
I mean, if people ask me, do I dance? I say no, on a regular basis, I don't. I mean, if another opportunity came to do it, I wouldn't say no. But I mean, I don't take class on a daily basis. But what I recognised very quickly into my current job was that having a relationship with my body is fundamental. So, because it changes how you think, it changes how, there's evidence that, movement stimulates creativity, but I know that if I lost connection to my body, it would fundamentally change who I am. But I find it actually not through dance on a regular basis, but, I spent 6 hours on the tennis court this weekend, and my other hobby is sea kayaking, which in many ways, I won't go into that, we can talk about that over a drink, but in many ways there are lots of connections to dance. That for me is really, really important. It's huge relief to me that I don't sit in dance performances watching it going, oh, it should be me, or I wish I was up there. That would be torture. I would hate that. I'd have to go and do something completely different and not go and watch performances. Every now and again, if I see a really good one, I will go, oh, that must be fun to do. And I might have a small glimmer of, oh, that would be fun. But I'm not tortured by it. Look, at one level, I think if you've been a dancer or an artist, it's sort of fundamental. It's sort of in your DNA. It does it influences how you think and how you engage with the world and other people. So even though I'm not earning my living from being an artist, I do think of myself fundamentally as a creative person. And actually, if the organisation that I'm working for had wanted just an arts manager, they could have appointed plenty of people other than me. I think. Well, the interesting thing is, if I was interviewing in that job now, I'd be more terrified. I would be more terrified because I know what the job is. I think there was a wonderful ignorance about going into it. I didn't fully know. Knowing what I know about it now, I'd be more terrified. But I do think of myself fundamentally as a creative person, but I get that creative element manifests in many different ways. And because I've been a dance artist, if I'm talking to colleagues who teach, or there are many different conversations I have with many different bits of the organisation. But because in a way I've been involved in all of those different bits of work at different parts of my career, at least I hope that when I talk with colleagues, they know that I am at least tuning into them on their, and will understand their concerns. Does that answer your question?
Partly.
But
the other thing was,
yes.
I wondered, because you identified as a dancer and you're still, in a way, talking about yourself as a dancer, and I was wondering, I think in the creative and cultural sector, you are seen very much as a leader.
I don't.
So I was just wondering.
Listen, I suppose the nature of this talk, Tracy, was that I was talking about my journey. So inevitably, there were lots of reference points to me being a dancer, but it's not actually something I talk about. Don't talk about me being a dancer on a regular basis with many people. It will come up in conversation, or very particular conversation, but it's not, I don't go around, oh, I'm a dancer, I was a dancer. No, I know you didn't, I'm playing, but no, it's interesting. So I suppose
So I'm wondering really if you take on the mantle, if you do really understand or acknowledge now that you are seen as a leader within the field and to be nominated, because when, initially thinking about the place, I hadn't thought about the place, that now people are going to identify the fact that you are, a black chief executive, somebody running an organisation of that nature.
Look, what I'm aware of, how other people perceive me, I think you can never control that. I'm aware of that in so many different contexts, which I'm happy to discuss over a drink. But of course, I'm aware that I have a responsibility. When people say, what's it like running your own organisation? I said, I don't run my own organisation. It's not me. If I thought all that was falling on my shoulders, I'd be out the door tomorrow. I have an amazing team of people who work with, and I guess my role is to help harness that creative energy and that intelligence, and know that there are lots of people in the organisation who are very good at things that I'm not, and to help focus that. So I suppose the only thing where I realise, when I think about leadership, I suppose I do realise I have a responsibility. The kind of things that might keep me awake at night, for example, when we had to apply, as we've done twice now, for Arts Council funding, for 3-year funding, knowing that in previous rounds some organisations have lost their funding completely, that's the kind of thing that would keep me awake at night, when I think, look, this is everybody's input, but fundamentally I'm carrying the buck, and if I get it wrong, some people will be out of a job, and this is an organisation that has got important work to do, and it deserves to be here in order to do that, not just for its own existence, but because of the work we want to deliver. Therefore, I need to play my role in getting that right. Otherwise, it will all go so pear-shaped. So that's the kind of, the responsibility that comes with being entrusted with it to play a role like that for a period of time.
Yeah. Sorry. Hi. I also grew up with the fundamental of, an atypical African home. But needless to say, yes, we do appreciate art, and we do appreciate the portfolio kind of economy that we are living in. But now, is it safe to say, for that young child who wants to dance, or who has that passion, is it safe to say that it should be more of a hobby or a talent, whereby it can be supplemented on top of, because as you're saying at the moment, that you're now more younger, much younger with age, and or older and wiser, but you now tend to concentrate on a business level. So this child who's growing up thinking that, yes, I want to be a dancer and it will bring me money and whatnot, is it safe to say?
Or not.
Or not, exactly, And so you want to groom this child to know that, okay, with education or with something else that is going to also bring in more success on top of your passion and your dancing. So basically, is it more of a dancing, is dance more of a passion, which is a hobby and a talent, or is it more to be seen as a career whereby...
I don't know how to answer that, except to say it can be both. And the person who has to make that choice ultimately is the individual. The late Pierre Boulez, the French composer, I saw an interview when he was asked, he said that when a young composer says to me, should I be a composer? He just says no. And when I heard that, I thought, that sounds quite brutal. But when I thought about it, I sort of understood why he took that stance, because actually, I think his view, look, I'm putting words into his mouth, but my sense of why he was saying that was that if someone needs to ask for someone else's permission, they don't want it enough. I mean, the young person who, regardless of what anyone says, that is what I'm going to do, and no one is going to stop me, is the person who will want it so much that they're probably going to succeed. So, one of my siblings, I was the only one in our family who went into performing arts until recently. My sister next to me was a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, HR. And then suddenly I discovered that my nephew is taking it really seriously. It was really funny. We both discovered it each other at the same time. He knew that his Uncle Ken did a bit of dancing, but he didn't quite realise who I was until someone at the institution where he was studying said, "Wait, do you know who is your Uncle Ken?" And when they realised it was me, they went, do you realise who he is or what he's done? And at the same time, I found out from my brother that he was going to a performing arts school. He's just graduated. I'm incredibly proud of him. He's just graduated and is going to go into his first show in Sheffield, in Showboat, in December. But talking to his dad, I said, okay, Charlotte, what was it that gave you, given that you know that you were told you were going to do medicine? Well, Charlotte said, first of all, I said, he remembered reaching a point where he decided, no, I'm not going to do medicine, I'm going to do physics, and he did. And at that point, our dad was, okay, But also he said, look, at the end of the day, I believe that, if a young person is more likely to succeed in something they're really passionate about. And I believe that. So I think we're living perhaps in a more enlightened age where people are able to say that. I think it's true. If someone is really passionate about something, they will devote time and energy to it. I'm not plugging his book, but Ken Robinson, one of the books he's written is called The Element, and the subtitle is How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything. And when he describes one of the characteristics of what it is to be in your element, it's that thing where you're doing something, whatever it is, for me it might be playing the piano, but you're doing something and actually before you know it, 2 hours has gone like that and you haven't even noticed because you're in that place, you're in that zone. Whereas other things, you look at every second that goes by is painful. So I think if you find something, no matter what it is, whether it's a hobby or whether it's your work, where you feel you found something where you feel absolutely at home in it, and you're passionate about it, and you don't even question the time you spend doing it, then I think those things are gifts and they should be celebrated, whether you make your career from them or whether you celebrate them as hobbies.
Sorry, I have the cold. I'm so sorry. First of all, I've been to a couple events before that Success Talks has hosted, and you are by far the most inspirational one that I've had. And it's really surprising because I number one, know very little about you. And number two, I don't have a creative bone in my body, which is why, following on from what you've just said, is my first question, which is similar to the gentleman over there. I kind of have three, but I'll be very, very quick. The first thing I wanted to ask is, I guess it's quite personal because I like I said, I don't think I'm creative at all. Seeing that you've taught from very, very young to very, very old, do you think that it is something that can be created? Because it asked me to draw, asked me to sing, asked me to dance, asked me to do anything.
Are you asking, can you teach creativity?
Yeah. Is it
okay.
What do you think can help someone foster or try and bring out their creative side, if there is one to find?
Look, sometimes I think when you have, if you have these conversations with like government ministers, for example, sometimes I think they get the wrong end of the stick because they think of creative as a subject that you put on the timetable, and then you go, right, there it is. How do you teach it? And I don't think it works like that. I think you can approach anything creatively, and I think as human beings we are creative. I mean, for goodness sake, how did we invent the bicycle wheel? Human beings are creative. Whenever we're in a tight spot, we find a solution to something. We make decisions all the time. You might not recognize it in yourself because perhaps you put creativity in a particular box and you put it on a pedestal and you look for a certain kind of thing that you identify as being creative. But we are all creative. We absolutely are. It's easy for me to talk very specifically about, about dance in that context. It may not relate exactly to your question, but these young ballet kids who have become experts at being told what to do, they've learnt steps by rote, they're very sophisticated, at 9 and 10. But if you ask them just to go over there and create a dance, they'd stand there with wide eyes and look terrified. But if you say, okay, you've got 2 minutes, I want you to give me a run and a slide, go. They'll do it. If you give them little bite-sized tasks and little choices where there's enough freedom but also enough restriction to give it a focus, they will come up with things very, very quickly. You'll be surprised. And within an hour, they'll have a dance. And that would be true both of kids who've had extensive training and maybe kids who've never danced before. So that's been my experience. So I think if you're someone in charge of nurturing or trying to nurture creativity activity in other people. I think it's about how you create the context for them. You're looking at me quizzically, not totally convinced, and I'm trying to think desperately what else I can say to answer that question. And I will think about it. If you want to talk about it over a drink, I'm really happy to, because I don't believe there's anyone in this room that isn't, by your human nature, creative.
Just looking at you, I mean, look at the way you're dressed. That shows that you have some creativity within yourself. And for me, I mean, it's something that I also recognize because I love to dance. So that's the way I express my creativity. But a year ago, a friend was talking to me about a fashion project that she was doing, and she wanted to work with me. And I was like, I don't do fashion. I don't like fashion. And she said, every time I see you, you're the most stylish person that I know. So how can you tell me that you don't like fashion? And I guess for me, because I wasn't into runway and Vogue and London Fashion Week, I thought that I didn't like fashion. And having that conversation with her, and then I read a book about fashion and the many multifaceted layers that comes with fashion, I actually thought, okay, well, maybe there is some part of me that does appreciate the fashion industry. So it's really, like you said, it really is about what you think, what you think it means to be creative, and how you express that part of yourself. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the way you dance. It could just be the way you style yourself. It can be the way you approach life, and it's not about what somebody else thinks. It's a creative.
Have you ever found, that's a really, really nice feedback. Have you ever found yourself just asking the question, what if? ... Do you ever do that? Do you ever go, what if I don't know, I mean, it might be what if I went to Tesco's instead of Sainsbury's? But, it might be as mundane as that. On the other hand, that is creative. That's a creative choice. Do you ever find yourself in that mode? Well, then for me, that is absolutely at the heart of creativity. Just that questioning, that open questioning about anything, I think leads to creative decision-making. I mean, look, I think decision-making and creativity are hand in hand. If you look at a piece of dance on stage, you could say one way of defining it is it is the result of many, it's the creative result of many decisions that have been made along the way. It's like a map of all those decisions. And so I guess to be creative, the better you get at making decisions. It's not about right and wrong decisions, but just making one decision after another. It's like, it reminds me of that Alan Bennett play, The History Boys, when he says history. It's just one blooming thing after another. Okay. We'll talk about creativity in the bar.
Hi, good evening, Kenneth. I'm Betty.
Hi, Betty.
Actually, I got two different questions, very different questions. When you were talking about being older and wiser, and also you got your dancer background, obviously it sort of held you in good stead because you kind of understand the journey, somebody from sort of the bottom, up, making through the runs. And now you, on a business level, you're also saying you got to be a leader and build teams and rely on people who can run things better than you. And also the bottom line to any business as well, you worry about the finance. You mentioned the Arts Council as being one of the key stakeholders in the scheme of things. So do you ever look for alternative strategies?
Of course we do. Of course we do. We know that we can't rely on the same level of public subsidy. We just know. So of course we're thinking about all sorts of things. Our finance director, this is Chatham House rules, so, between these, there's nothing hugely confidential about that, but our finance director, who'd been in post for just 1 month short of 26 years, retired at the end of July. And I sort of knew instinctively, but of course we went through a whole process to decide how we were going to deal with that. But our instincts were right, that post needed to split into two for a couple of reasons. One was we had someone who was able to do that job extremely well because they'd done it for so many years. But they were also head of operations, and they were also company secretary. It was a massive job. It actually, if you looked at it on paper, it was more than one person's job anyway. But given the challenges we were going to be facing for the business, we realised that we needed to build more capacity at that senior level for people who had the room to think about, new income generation, other kinds of business connections. Someone who wasn't just dealing with the day-to-day finance. So we actually have done that. We split the post into two. we've got an accountant who is dealing with the day-to-day finances on a fixed-term contract, so that the new incumbent in the senior post can figure out how the team's working, what they're going to want long-term. And at the same time, it gives them also time to really think about the bigger strategic challenges that the organisation is facing. So this morning we had a meeting, for example, about how we might completely refigure where our cafe sits. Because at the moment it's not at ground level, it's slightly buried. Now, I don't know where that conversation will land, but we're looking at the business case for maybe relocating our cafe. That would be a big capital project. It would involve a lot of money. We need to either fundraise it for, or get more money from the Arts Council, get a grant from the Arts Council. Lots of challenges. But of course, we're having to look at all those things. So it's brilliant, and we've got brilliant new governors who are also bringing lots of fantastic expertise and knowledge from different fields, and they're aware of the challenges. And so again, as I was saying earlier, there is this sort of jeopardy. And by the way, I'm not blaming the Arts Council. We're in exactly the same boat as them. It's not their fault. Whatever they get, it's not. They're facing. We're united in facing a challenge, and knowing that we're making the same arguments for why public subsidies should be continued for the arts. Because in terms of what the government spend overall, it's such a small fraction, and for every £1 that's given to the arts, we return £5 to Treasury. In terms of economics, it doesn't make sense to cut the arts. It really doesn't. All the creative industries as a whole. I mean, 76.9 billion to the economy in a year, and growing. That's huge. And just as other countries around the world are actually cutting tuition fees and investing more in arts and culture, we're in danger of going in the opposite direction. And it's one of the things we're leading at. And if we don't continue to invest in it, in 5-10 years' time, the success that we currently have, and maybe are in danger of taking for granted, I think we're going, what happened? Where did it go wrong? Where's the next generation of talent? Where's the next Warhorse, the next Matilda?
Just listening to your talk, I automatically thought about some of the dance companies that I have been most inspired by. The Alvin Ailey Dance Company, also on a sort of micro level, Ballet Black, who I saw at the Royal Opera House a couple of years back. And just sort of trying to marry the two things that you talked about. You talked about dance, and you also talked about your role as sort of in the business field. What would you say is your unique selling point?
About the place?
I would say about yourself, but also to add to that, do you think that it's because I think without the Alvin Ailey Company and also with Ballet Black, there is a distinct feature about those two companies. So that's what kind of brought the question to my mind. But in addition to that, do you think it's imperative to have a unique selling point in terms of success?
I really don't know how to answer that. What's my unique selling point? Because whatever's in my head or whatever I think it might be, I'd probably be way off the mark. How do I know? And so I can think one thing, but I might be so far from the mark, it doesn't actually matter at all. I mean, actually, it doesn't make any difference what's in my head. What matters is how other people perceive me. But actually, it's not something I would really give thought to in that way, because I know that I'm perceived completely differently depending on the context. I mean, which is why I'm perfectly at home with my own sense of identity, being of dual heritage, growing up in this country, but being half Nigerian. But I know if I go to Nigeria, I'll be called Oyinbo, white man, English man, because I'm paler skinned. Even though the first time I went to Nigeria, because in terms of my characteristics, I look so like my father, people who'd never met me before came up to you and they knew me by name. If I go to Sweden, where the majority of people are blonde and blue-eyed, and I see another black guy on the street, he might give me, not only the nod, but the salute or something, and I'll be like, hello, and it's not because I don't appreciate it, but of course I don't know that person at all. And so what I'm saying is context is everything. What I worry more about is our organisation's unique selling point. So many of the things, for example, that we might have initiated, having been around 45 years, have been replicated elsewhere. the things and circumstances change so much that you constantly have to reevaluate what you're doing, what's needed most, what can you do. I don't mean in a competitive sense better than other people, but what with the makeup of your organisation, your talent, your skills, your focus, what is it that you can do and that deliver the best and most positive impact for dance, for society, for human beings. So I question that all the time, and those are the conversations we have. I think that's way more important than my own USP. I mean, if you want to whisper into my ear later on what you think my USP is, that might be interesting for me. But does that answer your question, or would you want me to pick up on one aspect of that?
The second part of my question was, do you think it's imperative for one to have a unique selling point, or if you were, pursuing a business venture to have a unique selling point?
I would. My personal view is that a business, whether it's a charity or a commercial business, needs to find its unique selling point. I mean, last night, our royal patron's the Duke of York, and yesterday had one of their fairly regular pitch at Palace events where they had, I can't remember how many it was, but maybe up to 30 young sort of entrepreneurs pitching their business ideas, and they voted, for various winners. They held the after party event at an organisation which is just around the corner from the place, and this came up through a discussion we had recently, almost by chance, when I was asking about their entrepreneurial work at the Palace. And so we got to meet some of these really young entrepreneurs in an organisation called Digital Catapult, and talking to them, it was very clear, talking to them about some of their ideas, I thought, wow, that's a really good idea. Wow, that's a fantastic idea. I mean, their USPs were firing left, right, and centre. Now, there might be 5 other people doing a similar idea, which I don't know about, but it was very interesting talking to them. So you're right. I think any business needs to find its own reason for being there.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and watch the rest of our talks below.